Hello, David Clarke here, and I just want to do a quick video about setting up and using Handbrake, which is a free program for making H.264 and H.265. Often I just make my stuff straight out of the editing program, but there's some nice stuff in here, and sometimes if you get some files that just don't work properly, you can remake them in here and they'll work properly in your editing program. Now to get it, just put Handbrake in Google and find this website, handbrake.fr. Go to downloads, download the Windows 64-bit installer, and then once you've got that, run it and install it. Once it's installed, you start it up and it'll look like this. So as it says, you drop a file in there, you set some settings, you click go and it does stuff. However, before I do anything, the first thing I do is I go to the preferences, which you get to down here in the bottom left, and I'll go to output files. And here, where it says MP4 extension, it defaults to doing M4V, and it's much more common to use MP4. So I always change that so it says MP4 for a start. The second thing I'll probably do is put in a default path, which is where it'll actually make up your video clips. It's nice to have a default path because a lot of times I actually stick in a whole list of stuff into here to get it to encode it. I don't have to go and change each one to go somewhere else. Then go back to the program, find whatever it is that you want to encode. Now I'm dragging in a AVI file, which is in Grass Valley format, which is a tutorial I made for something else. And I want to make that into a different codec. So obviously the interface itself is pretty straightforward. You've got a bunch of presets which you can choose from here, and a whole bunch of settings here which you can change and make presets with. And there's a lot of stuff in here that I won't be going through, because it can do all sorts of things. You can actually rip a DVD out of this, make an MP4 and MKV file, which has got all the subtitles, all the audio tracks, and all sorts of stuff in it. I just want to use this for making a bit of MP4 video. So you've loaded something up, it gives you a quick preview here, it tells you some stuff about it. The dimensions tell you what size it is. Now you can choose to resize it using all this stuff here. And you can also choose to crop it. There's this automatic cropping setting, which means if you give it something which has, say, got black bars on it, it'll get rid of the black bars and only do the bit that doesn't have black bars. Again, I tend to not do all that with the videos I'm doing because I'm not sort of taking a movie and remaking it. So I'll either leave it on automatic or just go to custom and make sure I don't do any cropping whatsoever. And all this rescaling stuff, again, I don't do any of that. On the filter side, there is a lot of stuff that you can do, and one thing you might do is possibly come in here and choose a different form of deinterlacing if you're giving it interlaced stuff. This actually would do better interlacing than, say, you would get inside of Edius. But again, mostly I ignore that. And I just go to the video tab, set some video settings, then the audio tab, and then I encode it. So on the video tab, the first thing you've got is the encoder. So if you click on that, you've got lots of different ways of making it. So you can see you can do H.264 or you can do H.265. The X.264 is the kind of encoder that's using. X.264 is a free encoder for making H.264 and H.265, and it's well known for doing very good quality. That's probably the best one to go for. You can do normal stuff or 10-bit. I would keep to normal stuff because a lot of people can't play 10-bit. They won't play in like Windows Media Player, they would play in VLC. So the number of times I've actually made 10-bit MP4 files and given to somebody and they said, oh, it doesn't work. And it's all down to the fact they're only 10-bit. That's all there is to it. So generally you'd use that one. The other stuff is like this, we use the NVIDIA encoder. If you've got QuickSync, that would show up in here as well. So you'd have the possibility of using QuickSync. And there's all this other stuff. Never use the MP4 or the MPEG-2. Might use the H.265, so H.265 is just fancier encoding than H.264 and you can squash it a bit more, and again you've got the different variations of that. You can see H.265 can do 12-bit as well as 10-bit, which H.264 can't, and there's an NVIDIA version. But I'm really going for that one, which was the one that was there in the first place, because I'm going to just make an MP4 file. Then on the frame rate, I always want to do constant frame rate because I hate this peak variable frame rate stuff, and I would normally come in here and say same as source. So rather than trying to change the frame rate, I keep it the same as the original. The only really important stuff I fiddle with is here, and it's whether it's constant quality or what the bit rate is. Constant quality is what I use for tutorials like this, because there's not a lot going on, so most of the time there's nothing changing in the image. So if you use constant quality, it can really scrunch it down really well and make a very small file out of it. It makes stuff that's a lot smaller than the kind of stuff that I can make just using normal settings, which is why I use X.264 to do all my encoding for my tutorials and when I upload stuff to YouTube. And I generally stick it on constant quality, leave it in the middle, and then encode it. But that's because I'm doing stuff where not a lot is happening. If I had real video, I would actually go for this, average bitrate. So on the average bitrate, I'd have to put a number in. So this is kind of guesswork. Gotta work out some figures yourself about what is a good bitrate to do your video in. H.264 is very good at scrunching it up very small. So if I'm doing 1920 by 1080 in 25 frames a second, I'd probably think, oh, I can stick in there, oh, let's something like 15,000 and probably get away with it. You won't really know what it looks like till you try it. I mean, you might find if you put in 10,000, you get away with it. It's in kilobits. You'd probably be used to seeing it in megabits, which is obviously you take off the 1,000. But basically, 15,000 will be very, very good. If you want to make it smaller, you could try sticking in 10. 10 is a bit low for doing HD, but you never know. You could try it out and see what it looks like. And like all H.264 encoding, it's worse at fast-moving stuff and it's worse at blue and green stuff. So that's where to look for things that go really wrong. 2-pass encoding means it takes twice as long, but it goes over it twice and does a better job. Now, if I was going to take some HD footage that I filmed on something else and then remake it, I'd probably come in here, and because I'm going to reuse it in a program, because the program doesn't get on with that video and I've got to remake it into something it does get on with, I'd probably put in something like 20 there just to be on the safe side. I'd only try and squeeze it a lot if I'm trying to either upload it or make sure it fits on a USB pen or something like that. On the audio side, it defaults here to doing the standard audio codec that you use. You can see you've got lots of different options in here, but I'd stick to that one for MP4 files. And for the bit rate, I mean, it reckons 160 is enough. I'd probably put it up to 256. Again, this is just changing how much you're compressing the audio, and the lower that number is, the more you're compressing it. So if you say suck it down at 80 or 96, it's going to sound like a really bad telephone. You stuff it up to 512, well, it's going to be a bigger file, but probably won't sound much different to that. Would depend on whether you're doing stereo or mono or surround sound. If you're doing surround sound, you probably want to go up to 448. But for stereo, I would just do that. I don't have any subtitles, and you can put in lots of different subtitle tracks and all sorts of things. And I don't have any chapters. I mean, I could make a list and then import it and have chapters in my MP4, which people could get to if they have the right kind of program that actually understands chapters. A lot of player programs don't. You can never be quite sure what people are going to be playing it in, so most of the time I don't use that. So primarily, drop the file in, set some settings up with a decent bitrate, change the audio. Suppose I want to use that every single time, I can save that as a new preset. And as I'm trying to remake a bad video, I'm going to call it Remaking HD, so I know what it is. Now, next time I come in here, of course, you can click on this and you can look at all these presets and you can choose Remake HD. If I really, really like that preset and I want to use it all the time, I can come up to here and say set current as default. And now every time I come into it, it'll already be set up like that. Then I just want to encode it. Where's it going? Well, it's going to that default folder and it's got the name that I gave it. It's got a 1 at the end there because it is used to doing sort of batch encoding. You can put in 4 or 5 things and it will number them as you go. If you don't want to have the extra 1s and things stuck at the end, again, go up to the Preferences, Output Files, and then you've got this thing, File Format. If you get rid of that minus title at the end, then it'll literally just put the source name in. It won't change the one I've already got, but it'll change future ones. And once you're ready, you can just press Start Encode, and off it goes and encodes stuff. You can also set up a queue of stuff. So suppose I've set my first one up, I'm going to add it to the queue. Then I can open up another video file, wait for it to scan it, change the settings or keep the same, and add that to the queue. If you want to see the queue, click on that, and there you are, you've got the little queue. The one at the top here has an exclamation mark, because that's the first one I just set going in the tutorial, and I didn't bother to wait for it to finish. But now I've got 2 or 3 set up, and I can then start the queue, and it'll go through and do the lot. I've also got this nice thing down the bottom here, where I can say, what do you do at the end of it? Well, I could just turn off Handbrake, or I could shut the entire computer down, or sleep it or hibernate it. That's good if you're doing a whole bunch of things overnight, and then once you've finished it, you want to shut the computer off. Only thing to remember is if you set shutdown, then come out of Handbrake and go back in again, shutdown is still set. Number of times I've just come in here to do a quick encode, forgotten that that was set on my last job. I let it go, I'm busy doing some emails or something, and then suddenly the computer shuts down because I left that on shutdown. The other thing you can do when you open a source is instead of just going one file at a time, you can point it to a folder and say, bring in everything from that folder. It'll scan everything in the folder, which can take time, depends on what the footage is, how big it is, all that sort of thing. Work out what out of that is stuff it can do, because I know that folder's got some pictures in as well as some MP4 files, but it'll work out all the files that it can actually re-encode. It lists them up here, so you can see I've got 25 different files. This is just all random files taken off of a camera. Tells you the length and so on. And if I want to, I can just come up to add to queue, click on the little triangle and say add all, and it puts all of them in the queue. And now I've got 26 jobs in the queue, and I can just click start queue and it'll go off and do the lot. As I say, there is a lot more this program can do. It does different types of files. So MKV files are different from MP4 files in that they can have a bit of video and a bit of audio, but they can have multiple audio tracks and multiple subtitle tracks. MP4 files can't have subtitle tracks in them. So that's quite a nice format to do, especially if you're trying to convert a DVD's worth of stuff, which has got lots of subtitles and different audio tracks, into something that you can stick on a hard drive somewhere. But if it's stuff that you've made yourself, you're very unlikely to have subtitles, you're very unlikely to have audio, so you're going to want to make an MP4 file. But it does that kind of thing. It also does these WebM things. You can do things like resize it and get rid of black borders. You can use all these different types of filters. Now, most of these I wouldn't do. I would do all my stuff in the editing program and then just give this a final file. If you make subtitles, you can bring them in and you can add in different subtitle tracks. And you can import different subtitle files which you've made somewhere else. You can see the different formats that you've got there. And the other thing is chapters. If you make up a chapter list in the right format, you can actually bring in a whole bunch of chapters in here and then have chapters in your video. So whether people can see those chapters does depend on what they're playing it with. And you've got no control over that. I know that if you have chapters in here and you play it in VLC, you can see the chapters. Media Player Classic, another one that I use, you can see the chapters in that. Some of the other programs, you can't see the chapters. So unfortunately, it's not as good as, say, doing a DVD, because you can't always have chapters in it. But so there's a lot of really nice things you can do in it. But the main thing, it's a free program, it does really good quality, and actually it's pretty easy to use. So anyway, that's a little introduction to Handbrake. Hope it's useful. For more information on video stuff, go to www.dvctraining.co.uk, where I've got more tutorials, both free and more comprehensive paid-for ones, and more information on things like Edius and Resolve and so on. Please remember to subscribe and like this video, and I'll see you next time.